Welcome to a new look at an ancient view of the universe. This is my new geocentric plane flat Earth enclosed 3D model using Google SketchUp. In it, I've taken inspiration from ancient cosmologies like the Egyptians, the Vedas, the Hebrew, Japanese, Enoch, Mayan, and many others, including modern flat earthers like Josh Wall, who made W-A-H last name on YouTube, who made a video showing the astroplate, demonstrating how a reflective firmament can explain star trails in the southern hemicycle using an astroplate. So what I've done is made a 3D model here with the astroplate, and I want to show how it matches the ancient cosmologies. So if we look here at the Vedas down here, you can see an Earth plane that extends 4 billion miles. It's huge, but we're only looking at this Earth plane in the center, this little green chunk in the center. That's our Earth plane. You notice it has a chariot for the sun, the moon, and planets, but it has a starry plane up here, which is an astroplate that I've added up top, up here. And Mount Meru I've put as a vortex style. If we look over at the Egyptians, they have a similar cosmology. They have Nut, which is the female who holds the stars above her, and the same thing with the ancient Hebrew conception of the universe. You have Sheol, which is Hades or the underworld, and I don't depict that here in this model, but it's got the same thing, waters above with the firmament and everything between it, but I'm explaining all that in a more realistic view using an astroplate. So how does this astroplate work? All right, let me get rid of the Earth plane, firmament, and atmoplane, vortex. And now we can look at how this works compared to the luminaries and rotation itself. All right, I have an animation here from January 1st, 2016 at midnight to January 5th, 2016 at 6 p.m. And if I start playing this animation, it rotates the astroplate, and we can see that from the top half, it rotates clockwise, and from below, it rotates anti-clockwise. Now that matches star trails of what we see in the sky. But how does that work compared to observations? So if we pause it here and bring back the Earth plane, and Google SketchUp runs a little slow, so you might lose some features in the astroplate. And we come to Texas, Texas, where I'm from, which is over here. I want to show how this model matches observations. All right, there we go. Now, due to perspective, the ground comes up and blocks most of what we see in the sky. And this is simple perspective, like looking down a corridor, you can't see the other end. The walls converge and the sky comes down and the ground comes up until they meet in the center. So if we rotate the astroplate, then you can see it's losing its features, that it's rotating counterclockwise here. And if I bring back the firmament and look over in this direction, you'll notice that I can see the top half here, but on the bottom half, I can't see it at all. And so if we switch to stellarium, we can see that looking north, this blue line represents the equator in the sky, or the cutoff point of the astroplate, and the red line represents the ecliptic. So if we move time, we can see that it's counterclockwise in the northern, and when we look south, it's clockwise in the southern. Remember, this blue line separates it. So when we look west, we end up seeing two opposite rotations in opposite hemicircles. Northern's counter, southern's clockwise, but together they meet as everything sets in the west and rises in the east. So this is simple perspective. Everything's rising from east to west, so when you look south, east is to your left, so it appears clockwise. When you look north, east is to your right, so it appears counterclockwise. And this matches the observations made here. The only difference is you can't see the southern section, which is reflecting off the firmament and would appear to be down here. And looking directly south, we would see a chunk of that over there, and then looking west, we would see everything setting, and back north, you can see part of Polaris, and some of Ursa Minor, and a few other constellations. Alright, so if we come back up here, and hopefully the astroplate works with me. I restarted it to see if it'll work better this time. Let's turn on keyframe animation. Okay, so this astroplate rotates 90 degrees every frame, so that completes a full circuit in 4 frames. So I have every day listed by 4 frames here, from midnight, 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m., midnight, 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m. And they're accurate to stellarium. So if I come over here to stellarium and I pull up the date, and I go down to January 1st at midnight, get rid of the floor, and we look at where the luminaries are. We'll start with the sun. There it is. The sun is in Sagittarius, and you can kind of see it, but it's between the legs of Sagittarius. So here I've put the sun between the legs of Sagittarius. Same with Mercury, Saturn, Venus, all in the same places. There's Mercury over here, Saturn, Venus by Scorpius, Mars, and then Jupiter. Oh, we got the moon over here right on the edge. But Jupiter is on the other side of that blue line. It's on the north face, while everything else is on the south face. So for here, Jupiter is going to have to be, see, there's the moon right on the edge, but Jupiter is going to have to be on the other side, on the underside, because Jupiter is on the north face, while everything else is on the south face. All right, so I'm going to explain sidereal day and solar day on this geocentric plane model. A solar day is when the sun completes a full circuit around the North Pole and ends up right back where it started with relation to the Earth plane. A sidereal day is when a star along the equator of the astroplate, or the edge of the astroplate, completes a full circuit and back to where it started with relation to the Earth plane. Now, a sidereal day, which is the astroplate rotating, is 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 4.1 seconds, while a solar day, which is a sun full rotation around the North Pole back where it started compared to the Earth plane, is exactly 24 hours. Now, the reason for that is because the sun proceeds along the ecliptic, which is this line right here that passes through the 12 constellations of the zodiac, like Aquarius, Capricornus, Sagittarius, Scorpius, Libra, Virgo, and then there's another 6 on the other side. On the northern face, these are the southern face, or the winter solstice. And since it's January 1st, December 21st would have been about right there, which would have been the December solstice. And on the other side, right in the center, is the June solstice. All right, so the reason that you have solar and sidereal days is because in 24 hours, if I just skip 4 frames, the astroplane won't turn because it'll make a full rotation. We'll see that the sun actually proceeded along the ecliptic during that full rotation. So when the sun rotates with the astroplate, it's proceeding, which means going backward, moving opposite the direction of the rotation. So if the astroplate is rotating clockwise, the sun is proceeding counterclockwise. Now the sun and the moon both proceed counterclockwise, and if I move another 24 hours, you'll notice the moon moves a lot, while the sun barely moves a little. And another 24 hours, same thing. Moon moves a lot, sun moves a little. And if we come to midnight on the 5th, we see that the sun is almost on the arm of Sagittarius, while the moon is in Libra. And if we jump over here to Stellarium, to date and time, and we jump to the 5th, you can see exactly that. The moon is in Libra, and the sun, get that oriented properly, oh, it's below us. The sun is on that leg of Sagittarius. The first it was here, second, third, fourth, fifth. And so the sun will continue to proceed along the ecliptic as well as the moon, but the moon moves twice as fast as the sun, so the moon will lap the sun inevitably. Notice how the sun is perfectly on the red line because it's on the ecliptic, while the moon is away from the ecliptic, beside the ecliptic. The moon crosses over the ecliptic right here. We're at the edge of the astroplate. So it's on this side of the ecliptic now, and when it crosses that blue line, which is from the south face to the north face, it'll cross the ecliptic and end up on this side. And then same thing, when it's on the below half, it'll cross the ecliptic while it's crossing the astroplate and end up on the other side. Right here where it crosses is where eclipses happen, lunar and solar. And so I want to make more videos depicting that in this 3D model, but it looks like I'm going to have to completely remake this 3D model because Google SketchUp is having trouble maintaining the features of the astroplate. Anyway, that's the video I made wanting to show how the luminaries proceed along the ecliptic. Now the planets do something peculiar. The planets, or the wanderers, the reason they're called wanderers is because they wander along the ecliptic, and they look like stars. They're not the sun and moon, which are clearly not stars. For instance, Mercury, if we come down here to Mercury, Mercury never strays too far in front or too far behind the sun. But like the moon, Mercury crosses the ecliptic to one side of the ecliptic, goes in front of the sun, crosses back, and then goes behind the sun. Never too far in front or behind. Venus does the same thing, only it goes a little farther in front of and behind the sun. So as the sun is proceeding along the ecliptic, Mercury and Venus are also proceeding with the sun, but then they surpass the sun, and once they stop proceeding, then they retrograde. Once they stop proceeding with the sun, then they retrograde. And all retrograde means is the luminary is now moving the same direction as the rotation of the astroplate. So right now Mercury is in retrograde. And that's where a lot of astrology talks about retrograde motions of the luminaries. And there was a time when astrology was astronomy. They were one and the same. There was no difference. So Jupiter, for instance, Jupiter and Saturn, they retrograde differently than Mercury and Venus. While Mercury and Venus go around the sun, are never too far in front, never too far behind, crossing the ecliptic, Jupiter and Saturn proceed for about, so Jupiter proceeds for about 9 months, stops, retrogrades for 5 months, and then proceeds for 9 months. Saturn proceeds for about, I believe it's close to that, like about a year, and then retrogrades for about half a year, something like that, and then proceeds. While Mars proceeds for about 3 years, retrogrades for 3 months, proceeds for 3 years, retrogrades for 3 months. So it's kind of a difficult concept to grasp. So I'll try to make a better video on retrograde motion of the luminaries with regard to the astroplate once I fix this. Fix this file in Google SketchUp. Of the luminaries without the astroplate. So you can see them rotating around the North Pole. Because they're moving with the astroplate, they're rotating around the North Pole, but they are all proceeding along the ecliptic on the astroplate. So it's kind of some relative motion. the astroplate and the luminaries with the sun and the moon. I want to do a more in-depth look at this animation that I made between January 1st, 2016 at midnight to January 5th, 2016 at 6 p.m. And I just want to show the luminaries orbiting the North Pole along the ecliptic within the astroplate. So I'll go ahead and hit play on the animation, and I'll slowly start removing and adding the Earth plane and astroplate, and removing and adding the luminaries and sun and moon. So right here you can see that, oh, and if I move the mouse too much, it kind of makes the keyframe animation extension in Google SketchUp act slow when the animation turns, so you'll just have to kind of look at what I'm looking for, or what I'm talking about. Okay, so if we look at the luminaries, like Mercury, Venus, or Mercury, Mars, and Saturn are in orange, while the sun is yellow, the moon is kind of white, bluish white, and Venus is kind of a light purple. I made these colors this way because that is how they look. Those are the colors they exhibit when I look through my telescope. So when I remove the astroplate, you can see the luminaries still orbiting the North Pole. But since the luminaries precede and retrograde along the ecliptic, their circles aren't perfect circles. They're basically spiraling, or like spiraling down or winding down. Now the one thing that's hard to understand, if we just remove the luminaries and look at the sun and moon, is that the sun and moon are on the top half of the plate right now, which is the southern hemicircle of the sky, which means that it's reflected off of the firmament. So if I take the sun here, make a copy of it, and then hit paste, you can see that the sun, and I might actually make an animation for this. The sun would actually appear to be right there due to the reflection of the firmament. So to an observer down here and say, Texas, where I'm at, let me get around that vortex. Let's put the camera down there. Fix the ground. There we go. So to an observer looking, oops, the ground too high. In this direction, the sun would appear to be right there because it is reflecting off of the firmament and showing the top half of the astroplate, if that makes sense. Anyway, so back to the animation. So if we remove the Earth plane and astroplate, now you can see the sun and moon completing their circuits. And you can't really tell, but the sun is proceeding along the ecliptic. If I bring back the astroplate, you can see that since the ecliptic is a half circle along one side of the face of the ecliptic, that as it rotates and the sun moves along the ecliptic, the circle that the sun is making around the North Pole begins to spiral inward and outward. So when the sun is right here, it is the autumn equinox. When the sun is right here, it's the day after vernal equinox. Same thing on the other side. When the sun is right here, it's vernal equinox, and when the sun is right here, it's the day before autumn equinox. And so when the sun is here, that's summer solstice or June solstice because it's in the Gemini. And when the sun is here, it is in winter solstice, or the December because it's in Sagittarius. So as the sun, as the sun slowly proceeds along the ecliptic, the circles that it's making, the circles that it's making around the North Pole, as it gets to the center, the perfect center, which would be December 21st, the circle would be the smallest. But as it gets out to the edges, the circle would be much wider. But when it flips to the other side, through the Enoch door, it also makes its way to the center. But on the bottom face, the north face, this is when it's over the Tropic of Cancer, and then it slowly makes its way to the equator, flips up to the top side, and when it's right over the December solstice, it's physically over the tropic. It's physically over the northern Tropic of Cancer, but it's reflecting off the firmament and appearing to be over the Tropic of Capricorn. And all the luminaries do the same thing. So like I said, it's kind of a difficult thing to grasp, but this is why I make these videos. Thanks for watching.